Do you feel more connected to Sweden or do you feel more connected to Germany at this point?
Hard to tell. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, I left Sweden. Like, I didn't know why I left Sweden because I grew up in a multicultural household. My dad is from the Caribbean and my mom is from the north of Sweden. So I always had different cultures, and I also grew up with an American passport. So I never in my life thought to myself, I will always live here. I always thought I'm gonna get my ass out of here. So then, when I got to Berlin and had lived there for a year, I asked myself, why don't I want to go home? And then I realized that here, like not here, but in Berlin, I'm a foreigner, but in Sweden I was a foreigner, like a second generation immigrant too. Even though I look Swedish and I spoke perfect Swedish or speak perfect Swedish, I still felt this underlying feeling of being a second generation immigrant, even though like it's very subtle, but Swedes have a tendency to, like, if somebody goes a bit against their culture, they will be a bit more wary. And if you are like, there's a difference if you are a foreigner. If you come from another country and then they know that you're a foreigner, so then they will they will. But when you are supposed to be a Swede, because you've grown up there, that's when you might like run into more people who feel like this country is racist. And yeah, the first generation, they're always cool. They're so happy. Oh, this place is so clean, or this everything works so well. But when you grow up in a system and you're not completely Swedish, like I realized when I left Berlin that the majority of all my friends who in Sweden, not Berlin, when you leave Sweden, the majority of my friends were multicultural. Like there were people who had like a mixed background, and Sweden has been very tolerant and like been letting in people from different cultures, but Sweden still has a very very strong culture that they don't brag about it, and that's the interesting thing. They say like they don't say we're the best. They just know we're the best. Like we and you see it because many of the Swedes who come to Berlin, they go back home because they realize like Sweden is the kind of if Sweden would be a parent, it would be the parent who cuts your food before you eat it.
Okay.
Berlin is the one who gives you the food and tells you to sharpen the knife yourself. If when it comes to like, stuff like dealing with the bureaucracy. So what I noticed with the Swedes in Berlin was that I felt like a fish in water, but many of my Swedish friends, they really were like in foreign land, and like they many of them can't really handle it. And
Yeah. Well, we have this kind of the same thing too in Prague. Is a lot of Americans, quite a
mhm,
few Americans, maybe not a lot, but quite a few of Americans come to Prague, and I would say like 9 months, max 12 months
mhm,
is about how long they stay here, and it's. I think a lot of them are expecting. I was even on a phone call with a guy who was trying to get advice about moving to Prague, and he's like, "Yeah, I think I'll work 20 hours a week, do private students, and then I'll travel whenever I feel like it." And
mhm.
it's like, dude, you're fucking delusional if you think you can do that. Like, you have to work, and then like the currency's not worth anything, so you can work and work and work, and then it's still not worth hardly anything in American dollars. So yeah, I definitely know that kind of vibe of just like coming across people, but then like it's always a new batch.
Yeah, like I cannot back that up with any numbers, but for sure, like Berlin is one of the cities where you get many newcomers, and like the majority of the people you will meet will be people who have moved in. Even the Germans who are open to hanging out are the ones who haven't like yeah they come from like a small village outside Stuttgart or whatever. Like they but the Berliners, you rarely meet them. Only if you like date them, that's when you maybe meet the real Berliners. But they will never really introduce you to their friends. It is a bit of a bubble that they live in, because they live a different life. They've been in the city all their lives, and then they have their friends already. They don't have the same need to connect with new people as a newcomer would have.
Yeah, it's definitely it's my experience has been when you're in a foreign city, it's and coming as a native speaker, it's one other foreigners or two people who really want to learn English. Um, but yeah, it's just
I would say there's another category, and it's the people who have lived abroad.
Yeah, definitely.
Everybody who has lived abroad knows how it is to be a foreigner. You have the deck of cards stacked against you all the time. You don't know the bureaucracy. You do not know the standards or what you're supposed to do or what you're not supposed to do. So you will always run into these stumbling blocks. And if you've lived abroad, you have more understanding for the people who are like foreigners. But if you've never lived abroad, you will be tougher on them and you will be less forgiving.
Yeah, well, I mean, even, I've lived all over the States. I've traveled a bunch, but living in a different country, it's just a different beast. It's a whole different legal system. It's a whole different way of seeing the world. Like Czechs, they don't eat bread hot out of the oven. They think it's unhealthy, like it's bad for your health, which is like the tastiest bread to me. But little things like that, it's that you kind of have to get used to, and
I did
it's
not know that.
yeah, yeah. They I think it's not just them. I think Hungary also believes this, probably other neighboring countries, but they believe if you eat bread hot out of the oven, it's unhealthy for you. What are some other fun Czech things? If you get a beer and you start drinking, like let's say you and your mates are getting around, and in the States it's like you get your beer, you start drinking. So maybe this is more a Europe thing, but if you are all getting around, you have to wait for everybody to get their beer and to cheers before you start drinking, or it's very rude. It's almost like an insult. Yeah. So,
That's interesting.
and it's little things like that, because I think that like when you're from a country, say you are a Czech person, you don't realize that this is something that only your country does. And so like you kind of take it as a rule of the world, and then
Yeah.
and I think probably the same applies for Berliners and people who are, natives, and they kind of they take the culture as the way all countries must work. And so they don't really understand that maybe you're just trying to figure out how things work there.